This presentation aims to provide context around the choice to use waste materials within an art practice. I mainly use things I find in the street, my own waste, food packaging, old clothes, sheets, etc. I have lots of stuff stored for future use, and I supplement this with things like threads and interesting fabrics found in charity shops. I've also now become known to friends and families accepting their old rubbish and struggle to say no to anything. I consider my work to be materials-led. For example, this piece started with items being thrown away by neighbours. Our streets often have boxes of items left out to help yourself to. The base of found things is a broken fan, which I've attached curtain rings to, again found in the street, also washers and ring pulls. The coloured cables came from an electric organ that was about to be skipped. It's rare I come home without some sort of street find in my pocket. Using these materials saves money, but more importantly, I consider it as a stance against consumerism, the associated waste, and ultimately human impact on planet Earth. Modern humans have lived on Earth for only a fraction of the planet's history, yet negatively impacted it more than any other living thing. This is a topic of interest to artists. For example, photographer Edward Batinsky's multidisciplinary Anthropocene project uses art, science, and technology to produce a body of work investigating humans' current and future impact on the Earth. It's increasingly believed that we've entered the age of the Anthropocene, the geological epoch in which humans have irreversibly altered the structure of the planet, leaving it in crisis. Climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss are the major factors leading us towards planetary crisis. Human waste production and management, or rather lack of management, is a major contributor towards all three. For example, large amounts of carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases, and methane are produced during the collection, processing, and disposal of waste. Open burning of waste occurs in many countries across the world, emitting black carbon and chemical emissions into the atmosphere. Water sources are polluted through runoff from landfill or from waste ending up in them. For example, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is now thought to cover an area 6 times that of the UK. Waste is a big problem, and it seems to be getting worse. It's going to be difficult to curb or control our waste problem under our current economic system. Capitalism needs us to keep buying more things. Advertising and propaganda push us towards consumerism. Many products are designed incorporating planned obsolescence so that they break easily, are impossible or too expensive to mend. We've become used to convenience in food, toiletries, and household goods, leading to lots of packaging and unnecessary items that make our lives easier than we now expect. The fast fashion industry is another major contributor. Low cost, low quality items that are often only worn a few times before being discarded. In the UK alone, approximately 350,000 tonnes of clothing waste are sent to landfills each year, and more is shipped abroad to become someone else's problem. The UN Environment Programme report that 2.1 billion tonnes of municipal waste was produced in 2023. This is predicted to increase to 3.8 billion tonnes by 2050, causing increasing global problems and financial costs. The dark blue purpley colour on the graph shows that over a third of this waste is considered to be uncontrolled, meaning in countries which lack the infrastructure to deal with their increasing rubbish, and that ends up being openly burnt, forming waste mountains, or ends up in the ocean and waterways. The light blue band shows what a small proportion is recycled, predicted to be less than 20% globally by 2050. Plastic is a major issue. The big plastic count involved 1 in 300 households in the UK, and it was estimated that of the 2 billion pieces of plastic packaging disposed of each week, only 12% is recycled, or more likely downcycled. The rest is burnt, shipped abroad, or sent to landfill. The problems caused by waste look set to get increasingly worse. But is recycling even the answer? Recycling isn't happening enough, and when it does, it isn't that great. There are issues with energy use and leakage of microplastics and chemicals into the biosphere. Plastics and some other items are limited in or if and how often they can be reformed. More often than not, items are downcycled. For example, glass bottles become insulation, textiles are turned to rag, plastics to something of lower quality and value. We need to move from the current linear model of take, make, dispose towards a circular model where reuse, recycling and upcycling are factored in from the design stage, alongside making sure we produce a lot less stuff in the first place. The UN Environmental Programme reports that for this to happen, everybody needs to be on board, from investors and big businesses, governments and individuals. We have plenty of information about the waste problem and the damage it is causing, but not enough is being done. Research has shown that information often isn't enough for people to make behavioural changes. Emotions and imaginations also need to be evoked for change to happen. And this is where art comes in. Art can make people feel and think in different ways and can be an important and powerful tool for social change. I'm now going to look at a few of the artists I find influential through their use of waste materials and messaging around this issue. Theda Sandford uses found and discarded materials. Around 90% of her work is created from recycled and donated items, something I also strive towards. She says that although the end result is artwork, she is driven by desire to take things out of the waste stream. She's also inspiring other artists to start looking at street finds and donated waste differently by communicating about her work and organising supply swaps. She encourages participation and deeper thought from audience members through asking for contributions of their own domestic waste materials to community-created installations. The pictured image is from Liz Miller's recent body of work, Portals, Objects of Beauty series. These start with pieces of broken plastic she's found in ditches near her home in rural Minnesota. I relate to how she sees potential in what has been discarded. She doesn't consider herself to make junk or recycled art, preferring to look at these materials in a different way and asking important questions about society. She states, "Why do we cast these objects away so quickly? Why do we live in a culture that is so quietly and loudly violent and neglectful? Why is care not taken to preserve and maintain?" Collective Guerra de la Paz use discarded textiles to create sculptural installations imbued with messages around sustainability, for example, in the form of Atomic, which alludes to the consequences of continued consumption and disposal. I've stored my own family's textiles and I'm starting to find ways to incorporate these into my work. Francesca Busca makes work which, in her words, protests against our disposable lifestyle, providing a new perspective on rubbish and embodying hope. In my world, rubbish gains new value, transforming from waste to wonder. Her Art for Trash initiative works with businesses to use their own rubbish to create artworks to display in their offices. By including employees in the gathering of waste materials for the artwork, she's encouraging a new way of looking at the potential for what is disposed of in the workplace. Once on display, the art starts new conversations around sustainability with staff members and clients. These are just a handful of artists that I admire and am inspired by for their choices of materials and the way they convey their messages around the issue of waste. I hope to follow in these footsteps, to continue collecting interesting objects found in the street, save my own waste materials to use, accept donations, and find those charity shop bargains as the basis of my own work. I was recently invited to work with 150 infant school children to make sculptures using waste materials. It was brilliant. It encouraged conversations about where these things normally end up, widened their ideas of what they can use in their own junk modelling and toy making, and inspired them to see that they can use stuff to make art instead of sending things to the rubbish tip. I hope to run more workshops and keep exhibiting my work, encouraging others to see the potential in these materials and give greater consideration to what we throw away and to what happens to it.